Minister of State Edmund Castro looked cool and unconcerned as he sauntered up Independence Hill, unfazed even as some spectators called him Clear the Check Castro. Inside the House, he stood to give account of his actions in the BAA scandal, stating that he had looked up the meaning of the word corruption in the dictionary, and what he did wasn't that.
But the only thing that is being said is that the board of directors of BAA has issued a number of checks in my name or on my behalf or to persons associated to me. There is no suggestion that the board did not have the lawful authority to issue checks, nor is there any suggestion or evidence that they had been influenced, that I had influence over the board by any improper means to issue checks. There is no suggestion that I had forced the board to issue checks or that I had extorted the checks from BAA office or from the board.
Castro spent some time explaining the checks written in his name and to pay expenses he incurred both politically and personally. He maintained that it is not unusual for organizations to offer assistance out of what is called a humanitarian fund. In regards to checks totaling more than $10,000 to assist in burial expenses, he claimed that because he is a popular politician, bus transportation for those wanting to attend was expensive. But he says that is not corruption.
One of those checks were issued to help in the defray expenses associated with the death of my dear mother, Mr. Speaker. I am deeply saddened and disappointed that the word of this assistant had been made so public and that it has become so controversial. I readily accept and admit that BAA wrote a check to help me to defray some of the expenses associated with the death and burial of my mother. This is no corruption, Mr. Speaker.
And then Castro went biblical in the House.
This outcry over the checks issued by BAA on the part of the opposition and the media, BNTU, reminds me of the righteous indignation on the part of the scribes and Pharisees, who was recounted in the Gospel of St. John, chapter 8, verse 1 to 9. Took to Jesus a woman accused of committing adultery and said to Jesus, "This woman is taken in adultery, in the very act. Now Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned to death. But what suggest thou?" And Jesus said to them, "He that without sin among you, let him cast the first stone."
Nobody got up to throw any stones at Castro, so he moved gamely on.
I am not saying that I have not made errors as a minister of state. None of us is infallible. Hello. But I assure you, Mr. Speaker, that while I cannot be guilty for making errors, I am not guilty for making errors, I am certainly not guilty of corruption, Mr. Speaker.
The Prime Minister, in response to a question about corruption by the opposition, continued to defend Castro, agreeing that it was not corruption. Mike Rudon for News 5.